Welcome to Switzerland, and more specifically, to Neuchâtel. In this video, I'm taking you to meet the artist who helped define the look of Middle-earth as we know it on the big screen. He's the illustrator and conceptual designer whose visions of Tolkien's world were so powerful that Peter Jackson brought him on board to work on the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movie trilogies. And until the end of 2026, here in Neuchâtel, his incredible artwork is on display in a major exhibition that invites you into his creative mind. We're going to step inside, explore this world of imagination, and hear from John Howe himself.
This exhibition, which is the inaugural exhibition of La Tour du Fantastique here in Neuchâtel, was put together with the idea of showing the amplitude and the variety of what we call fantasy, but also to underline the inherent nature of fantasy, which is its attachment both to landscape, to history, to art, and secondly to this area, to this region. An exhibition is always a strange exercise because I never see the art at home. It's always put away somewhere. I don't have it on the walls. So to actually be in the exhibition, I'm a little bit like a tourist in that I rediscover everything, and I rediscover how it's been arranged, because that is not really my profession to create exhibitions. So that was in the hands of Diane Launier, the director of La Tour. So I sort of come in, I mean, no, it's all mine, but it's almost as if I'm rediscovering it each time. But this configuration is new to me, so I'm enchanted. The business of inspiration and creation is more often than not in fantasy tied to some existing concept, theme, story, whether modern or ancient, which in no way precludes totally original work, which is a fantasy of my own making. So there are a number of paintings in this exhibition in worlds that I've dreamed up by myself, but all of the rest is usually, because it is illustration work to a large degree, based on some existing universe. Can you have too much fantasy illustration? I would say resoundingly no, because the capacity of any image to take the spectator a step further, to accompany them a step further on their own journey into these worlds, if that image is not convincing, if that image does not do its job, then it's very quickly forgotten. And I don't honestly believe that you can have too many images. It's up to us to learn which ones really are important to us. I know there are authors who dislike the idea of having their universes illustrated because they feel that the reader should have complete freedom. No indication, no guide, no accompaniment, no other interpretation. But I feel honestly that any door into the imagination is worthwhile taking. The fabulous thing about Tolkien is that it has the complexity, the richness, the palette of ancient myth and legend, but it is a modern story in the sense that it offers the reader a front seat and takes the reader along. And older texts are often hard to appreciate because of the manner in which they're written, the manner in which they've come down to us. But Tolkien, being a modern author, clearly takes all of that amazing material, adds in his own experience and point of view, and makes something which gives really the reader an inclusive visit, if you like. Tolkien is also very much an author who writes in images. And that is clearly, the best gift possible for any illustrator. Is it possible that the weight of all this Tolkien illustration is a burden on my shoulders and that I have to carry around and respect? No, not really. I'm not married to any of these images. If I change my mind in the future, and I change my mind generally every day. I will draw something differently. I think there are no official versions of anything. We have, in this case, a text which is fixed, but everything else around it depends on us. Although I'm a huge admirer of people who do comics who manage to draw the same character for years, it's something I would be totally incapable of, because every time I approach a text that I may know by heart, I'm not the same, even if the text is. The end product of concept work for a movie art department is very different from finished illustration, but the process involved is identical, because the artwork for a movie is not intended to be the final product. It's a step on the way. It can be quite sketchy, it can be quite abbreviated, if you like, whereas a finished illustration needs to do the full job. There are two countries in the world which have a remarkable connection to Tolkien. One, of course, is Switzerland, where Tolkien did his hike across the Alps from Interlaken to the Valais in 1911. And that was a very different Switzerland from the Switzerland today. There were no power lines, no hydroelectric dams, no ski resorts, very few roads. So it must have been quite a wild, inspiring, romantic country at that time, especially the alpine landscape. And that alpine landscape is what you can find today in New Zealand, because it's a much less densely populated country. And I think that inspiration is the child of chance, in that Tolkien's trip to Switzerland grandly influenced The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. That spirit was captured by Peter Jackson, who, being a New Zealander, wanted to shoot the two trilogies in New Zealand and not somewhere else. So it could all have come out totally differently. But, you know, that's how inspiration works. It's unpredictable. I'd be tempted to say that I don't really look back very much, but I do hope that there is an evolution in terms of technical skills, if you like. But I think also the really important part is an evolution in the way you see things, an evolution in the way you treat them, in the way you engage with them, and that permanent maintaining of contact with the world, today's world, yesterday's world, other cultures, other forms of art, are what makes any person's work of interest. And you know, I'm not a big, I'm honestly not a big fan of looking back at what I've done. Sometimes it seems a little daunting when something has gone particularly well, and you'd feel hard pressed to actually have that magic moment where everything just worked a second or a third time. But on the other hand, the really important work is the work that you're going to do, not the work you've done. Have I watched the films several times? I've seen the long versions once, I think. We saw them at the movies when they came out. But I'm unfortunately, and to my shame, not one of these people who manages to see them more or less every year. But I've reached a point now where I can't remember if something is actually in the books, in the movies, or in one of my pictures. So I'm very confused. So what I do fairly often is go back and read a passage from the book. And I don't want to be using inadvertently second-hand ideas. These last few decades I think there's been a globalization of fantasy in that it's become a recognized literary genre the world over. And this is a form of recognition which was a long time in coming, and fantasy has long been considered a sort of subgenre and not really worthy of interest, and that's all changed because fantasy is the vehicle. Fantasy is not the message, if you like. The message is an important one, and whether it's clothed in what we call fantasy or not, the message is still the important part.
My heartfelt thanks to John Howe for generously giving his time for this interview. It was a true honor for me to speak with him and to share this moment. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to the entire team who welcomed me so warmly for their kindness and generosity. I can only encourage you to visit this exhibition if you have the opportunity and the time. It is truly worth the experience. As for us, this is where we say goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos.